Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the show. Got a good show for you here today, guys. We're going to be talking about bold predictions. My bold predictions for the 2023 upcoming fantasy football season. So, I'm going to be starting right here with the first prediction on my list, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars being a top 5 offense in the entire NFL. I mean, look, we got a third-year Trevor Lawrence coming in, and, this dude's been getting better on a weekly basis as we've watched him in his career. We know that this dude's supposed to be a generational talent who has incredible potential as an NFL quarterback, and I think we're starting to see that he is going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the league at some point in his career. I think the major leap that he's going to be is in his third season that we have upcoming. So Trevor Lawrence is going to be great. We now give him the additional weapon of Calvin Ridley. Guys, Calvin Ridley was a receiver that was tops in the league in air yards and receiving yards and his yards per route run last season that he played a full season in the NFL. Now, obviously, that was a few years ago. We've seen the last 2 seasons he hasn't played a full season, but we know how ridiculously talented this guy is. This is a wide receiver who was a top 5 wide receiver against man coverage in his last full season in the NFL. So we've got a ridiculously talented Calvin Ridley to add to the offense. We've got a second-year Travis Etienne, who we know is an electric playmaker, not only in the running game, but in the receiving game. So this team has a ridiculous amount of awesome receiving weapons, including an awesome pass-catching running back in Travis Etienne. So they've got all the offensive weapons in the world. We've got a third-year Trevor Lawrence, who we know has unbelievable potential at the NFL level to lead this offense. This offense, really kind of found its groove this last year. And with the addition of Calvin Ridley, there's no reason why they shouldn't be even better this coming season. I think that this is going to be a top 5 offense in the NFL. And what that means is that if you have the chance, you want to stack as many offensive weapons that are on the Jacksonville Jaguars as you possibly can. So, if you're able to get something like an ETN and Trevor Lawrence stack or Ridley and Trevor Lawrence stack, it's going to be very beneficial for you. Not only are these guys going to get you ridiculous amount of fantasy points, but you can get them all at a great value in the draft because they're all being slept on. Next on my list is I think that Ja'Marr Chase is going to be next year's wide receiver 1. Now, a lot of people might not think that that's that bold of a prediction because, he's a consensus first-round pick. But, I am getting pretty close to just betting Ja'Marr Chase versus the field for who's going to be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy. And that's because, look, this guy only played 12 games this last season, and he was tops in the league in red zone targets. Okay? This guy gets targeted like crazy within the red zone. We know that he has some of the best big play ability of any wide receiver in the entire NFL. His run after the catch abilities are awesome. He gives you a weekly ceiling of potentially getting you over 200 receiving yards in a week. We know that he has great hands. He makes awesome contested catches. And more importantly than any of this, he plays in an offense that is, on any given season, an offense that could be the best offense in the NFL. I mean, hands down. The Bengals could easily be the highest scoring offense in the entire NFL next season. Ja'Marr Chase is going to be the number 1 benefactor of this because he's the number 1 weapon in the offense. We have an elite talent in Joe Burrow to sling him the rock. This is a team that's competitive on a yearly basis. Ja'Marr Chase has shown nothing but being absolutely awesome since coming into the league. I think this guy is going to be next year's wide receiver 1. And I'm actually, at this point, I'm going to be taking him ahead of Justin Jefferson or even Cooper Kupp. Next on my list is going to be, and I think a lot of people aren't going to like this one, but look, I think that Breece Hall and Javonte Williams are going to cause a lot of people to lose their leagues this coming season. I mean, you have to take them with a really high pick, and we've seen in the past years of fantasy that running backs that are coming back from, major knee injuries, especially torn ACLs, torn MCLs, combinations of both, they never really return to form until 2 seasons after their major injury. We saw it with Saquon a few years ago. 2 years ago, his first year back from his major ACL injury, he was afraid to make jump cuts, and he wasn't really playing like the running back that we knew he could be. And then last season, this past season in fantasy, he absolutely went off because he was 2 years removed from his major injury, and that's when a running back is actually truly recovered from an injury of that nature. So considering the fact that you have to take both Javonte Williams and Breece Hall in either the second or third round of fantasy drafts, you're just paying too much for a player that has a very high likelihood of just not really being at 100% and even potentially re-injuring themselves. So, their likelihood for re-injury is high. Their likelihood of just being a bust in general because they're not really playing at their full strength is also extremely high. So to take either of these players in the second or third rounds is just not smart whatsoever. And so I think that people that waste second and third round picks on these two running backs are going to end up not having a really good chance to win their league. Because as we know, the first 3 rounds, it's really important to hit on those picks. And if you're taking either Breece Hall or Javonte Williams, you're essentially throwing a pick away because these guys aren't going to be 100%. Next on my list is I think that Justin Fields is going to be a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. Now, this is a guy who averaged 7.1 yards a carry this past season. He was running the ball like crazy. We know what an elite rushing quarterback he could be. And so we got to figure with all the cap space that the Bears have, they are going to add better pieces to their offensive line, better wide receivers. I mean, they haven't had a true number 1 wide receiver as far as fantasy statistics in quite some time. So they absolutely have to improve the wide receiver room. So you figure that change is coming inevitably. And inevitably, they're going to also have to really, really improve the offensive line if they want to be a better football team. So you got to figure with all the cap space they have, and the fact that they're going to get some early draft picks, you got to figure this team is going to improve significantly as far as their offensive line and as far as their wide receiver room. And we saw how good Justin Fields was this last year with essentially no wide receivers outside of Darnell Mooney and a terrible offensive line. So imagine how good he's going to be when these things actually improve. And they are certainly going to help him propel into being a top 3 quarterback, I'm almost certain, this coming season. Yes, next on my list is going to be DK Metcalf. Guys, DK Metcalf, I think, is going to be the biggest bounce back in all of fantasy football at any position as far as total fantasy points accumulated. Now, he's been a bust really the past 2-3 seasons. Like his first few seasons in the NFL, he was absolutely awesome. These past few years, he's just kind of underperformed. But look, Tyler Lockett is above the age of 30 now. So you figure his target share is going to be down a little bit. And we know that Geno Smith really outperformed expectations this past year. So we know that DK Metcalf is a player that could actually benefit from being in a very good offense. Now, they're going to be running the ball a lot with Kenneth Walker. But they have to have a number 1 wide receiver, considering the fact that DK Metcalf is one of the most physically dominant wide receivers in the league. And he's still extremely young, especially in comparison to his fellow wide receiver and Tyler Lockett, who's the other target hog wide receiver on the team. You got to figure that the targets for DK Metcalf are going to be immense this coming season. And so the fact that he finished as the wide receiver 24 is extremely fluky. Look for him to have a massive bounce back this coming year and be one of the biggest bounce back players in all of fantasy football. Next on my list is I think that Calvin Ridley is going to be hands down the biggest steal in the draft. He's going like as wide receiver 45 right now or 47 or something crazy like that. I mean, that's absolutely mind-blowing. This is a player who, like I said earlier in this video, he was tops of the league in his yards per route run, his air yards, his receiving yards. His last full season, he had over 1,300 receiving yards. He got in the end zone like crazy. He was one of the best wide receivers in all of fantasy. And we now give him a super elite talent quarterback like Trevor Lawrence to sling him the rock. His upside is absolutely immense this year. And I think that value-wise, he's going to be hands down the biggest steal in the draft. Kind of right up there with Deshaun Watson. But like Calvin Ridley will probably be the biggest steal in the draft this coming season, if not the second biggest steal after Deshaun Watson. Next and final thing on my list is I think that Garrett Wilson is going to be top 3 in the league as far as overall receiving yards. Look, this past season, he had over 1,500 air yards. This was top 11 in the NFL. He saw 147 targets and actually didn't complete he didn't have as many receptions as he should have for having that many targets. So you got to figure he's going to have more overall receptions this year going into his sophomore season. And he still had over 1,100 receiving yards this past year, despite pretty much underperforming based on how much he was targeted and how many air yards he received. So you got to figure that going into his second season, this is a season where, we see most wide receivers start to break out kind of in their sophomore season. You got to figure that Garrett Wilson has a monster season coming. He's far and away the clear-cut number 1 wide receiver on the team. So considering the target share he's going to get and his awesome run after the catch abilities, I love this guy to have a massive season as far as overall receiving yards. And I think that he's going to be a top 3 wide receiver in all of fantasy as far as overall yardage. Okay, I do appreciate you guys tuning into the video. I hope this helped. Appreciate you guys. I will catch you later.